alcohol poisoning, only to later find that a video surfaces showing this young lady naked and fighting one of the friends in the room, uh, I guess that they were staying in. And the fight was just awful. I mean, this girl was really getting beaten. And what's even sadder is that two of her friends were recording. Well, you see two friends recording. And you even hear one of the friends, supposedly her best friend, saying, "Can't you just fight her back? Are you going to fight back?" And eerily, she says, "No." Man, this really touches my heart because one, I have ties to Charlotte, North Carolina. And two, I attended Winston-Salem State University, in which this young lady was a graduate. 25 years old. Have you guys heard this story?
I have, and I've looked into it a great deal. A very sad situation. The video, which is just all over the internet, is so hard to see. And it's I think it's even sadder just to know where our young people are going. The mindset, because to be able to record something like that and to stand there and watch someone not defending themselves, because based on what I saw, she wasn't, she wasn't, as you mentioned, she wasn't fighting back when it was said, "Aren't you going to at least fight back?" And she says no. She's just sitting there and she's just being beat down literally by someone who she trusted to literally go to another country with, trusted enough to stay in a room with, and was literally attacked, savagely by this individual who she obviously knew, and the friend who recorded. It's just a sad situation, and it's scary because it lets you know that for a person to do something like this, it's heartless. And again, I wonder what went on in her mind to be able to do that to someone who she called a friend.
I know. I know. Bob, were you familiar with this story?
No, I'm not, but just from listening to it, I'm assuming that, and it's just pure assumption, that apparently she knew this guy that was doing this to her and perhaps was afraid of him because of how he would react, which could be worse.
Well,
I don't know, but it amazes me how someone can videotape a friend and not step in and help.
I know. Well, Bob, the person that appeared to be beating her was a female. Appeared to be a female.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but there was some talk on social media. I mean, I was just reading as much as I could while I was on there. Some thought that she was a man. There was even a picture of a transformation from male to female, and some were saying, "Oh, it was a man that was truly fighting her," but we're not sure about that at all. At least I'm not at this particular time.
Yeah, it's sure speculation.
Either way, I mean, it was just disturbing to see and to know she was not even clothed. But I don't believe she died right there. We only saw a clip of that video. And, I mean, she was taking those punches pretty... I mean, she was doing the best she can with that. I mean, she was thrown to the floor. Part of her body slammed up against the bed, the side of the bed at the bottom. And it was... she suffered a cracked spinal cord, I believe.
Oh, my.
And there were some other injuries there. There was some talk later of bruises and bumps to her face, a split lip, things of that nature. So this happened, I think, October 28th. And now this new video has surfaced. And her parents now have a different view of what really happened there in Mexico. Either way, it's sad, but it brings us to our topic today, to me, discipline. And a lot of times we hear that you have to train the child when he's younger, or you have to discipline that child when he's younger, he or she, to kind of curb him from doing bad things as they get older, But these people involved here were all in their 20s. Going back to the UVA student, I think he was a little older than the students that were on the bus with him that he shot. But Our topic, discipline. Let's start with that. If you've been listening to us, this is Chat City with P. Ross on Oak 93.5 FM. I have in the studio with me today Mr. Bob Andrade, a musician, and Tameka Douglas, who is a national evangelist and a social worker. All right, Tameka, I'm going to let you start our topic today, child discipline. But I'm going to say this: spare the rod, spoil the child. I've heard that all my life. And to me, spare the rod or spare the cane or spare the switch or spare the belt, spare the extension cord or spare the book, brick, whatever you get hit with. It's saying that you're going to spoil your child, or you're going to cause your child to be rotten, or you're going to waste that child. You're going to ruin that child. You're going to deplete that child, or you're going to throw that child away. Now, the reason why I chose this subject, I was talking to a very close friend of mine, and she made a statement. She said, well, spanking is not the solution to everything, and she was referring to disciplining children to get them to do better. Tameka, let's start with you. What do you think about that?
Yes, and that is something I've always heard as well. And when we look at that, I think we have to look at the context of that scripture and go back to what the rod was in that day and what it was used for. The rod was used to bring the sheep. It had a little curve on the end and was literally used to bring the sheep back into line when sheep would veer off or get out of line and things of that nature. And I do believe that it is imperative that parents consider what discipline measures are most appropriate for children based on what they've done, for instance. But I do want us to also know that physical discipline isn't always the answer. I think that it's so important that parents, especially in this day and time, realize that communicating with children sometimes can go far more than beating them. And in particular, when it comes to objects, I know in our day, and of course, it may work for some, you would hear of parents that would get switches, parents that would use whatever they could find to get you when you got out of line. And again, for some children, and to each his own when it came to that kind of thing. But I think it's so important that we know that excess, is that really the answer, and is that really hurting or doing more harm? And as we look at some of the things that we see in adults and even in our youth that may have been beaten, in excess was used with that, is that why we're seeing some of the problems we're seeing now with just the anger and that anger outbursts and things of that nature? So I think it's a situation where it's dependent upon the child. But again, the only method of discipline isn't certainly physical. It could be taking away something from the child, something they like, or maybe, we use, of course, punishment where you may have to come home from school versus being able to go to the game or something to that effect. That's also a method of discipline that we can consider versus using an object or even our hands when it comes to disciplining children. So I think we have to certainly use wisdom and know that it's based on different circumstances and situations.
And you have a child, is that right?
I do.
Okay. And you used, what form of discipline did you use with your daughter, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And she's 20. I do have a 23-year-old daughter.
Okay.
And with her, thankfully, she hasn't been perfect by any means. Thankfully, I didn't have to use a lot of physical punishment when it came to her throughout the things that she did as a child. So in many cases, whenever she did do anything that I considered punishment worthy or discipline necessary, it was typically okay, well, stay in your room, or well, let me hold this for 2 or 3 days, or something to that effect. But again, thankfully, and this is, I give all glory to God, I haven't had to use a lot. She's been a good girl and is a good girl now. So thankfully, I haven't had to really discipline her a lot for things. She's been a great child. But again, throughout that childhood, I mean, the Bible tells us that folly.
I'm going to give her a house of okay?
The Bible tells us that folly is in the heart of a child. So of course she did things as a child that, maybe I remember in preschool she went through a time where, she was scratching, and oh gosh, that would just get me when I would pick her up and the teacher would say, oh, she scratched somebody today. So things like that, I remember I would pop her or say, listen, you can't do that, or and it was based on her age. Okay, is she gonna really understand if I take her home and take her clothes off and just take a belt and whoop her, or is she gonna understand me popping her or saying, hey, this is how that felt, you can't do that to a child. So in those cases, when things like that came up during her preschool years, that's what I would do. It would be literally be, tap on the hand or something like that, or taking away something she liked, a toy that she liked, things of that nature. And again, this is based on the child, based on what your beliefs are in raising your daughter, but that was my experience.
Okay. And that was a good question of mine. At what age do you begin disciplining your children? Like, it for those that spank, what I'm sure you don't want to do it when they're too small, but
Right.
then, I don't know. Bob, you have a couple of daughters, is that correct?
I have 4.
You have 4 daughters, okay. And tell us about your disciplining methods with your children.
Well, I was fortunate enough to have 2 older sisters, so I was, and of course with my mom, had a dad for a while, but he left when I was about 5, 6. And so I was used to all the drama. So with the 4 girls, I was used to that. Now, I had to have a little stick that I would use when they were a little bit older, say when they were walking or just a little bit older than that. And so I would, well, I didn't use the rod then, but I would just spank them, or most of the time my ex-wife and I, we would say, no, you can't do that, and try to talk to them about it. As they got older, I did have a little rod, and one of my daughters reminded me, because when we talked about spanking, she said, oh, we liked it when you spanked us, Dad. I said, why? I mean, what?
That's a first.
And I said, why? What do you say? And she said, because you were always so afraid of hurting us that you really didn't spank us hard. So I spanked them probably till they were about 7, maybe 8, I think, that old. And then I said to them, okay, you're getting too old to be spanked. Now we're going to be taking things away. You're going to have to learn discipline. You're going to have to learn how to discipline yourself. And so, as when they were a teenager, I know my youngest daughter, we said, okay, wherever you go, you got to call us, because we had cell phones by that time. Well, she did a few times, and I took it away for a whole week. Oh boy, that just about killed her. So she always made sure she called. But I also would go in if I came home and I was grumpy or whatever, and I snapped at him, and my ex-wife would bring that to my attention. I felt bad, so then they knew that if I went into the room and sat down on their bed, they knew that I was going to say, who was wrong? And they would say, you, Daddy. I said, that's right. I was wrong, and I'm asking for your forgiveness. Because I wanted them to, when the time came for them to be married, that they would marry someone that was man enough to admit when he was wrong and apologize. So that's how I raised my girls. They weren't perfect either, and then sometimes, things happen to them individually as they're growing up outside the home that can cause, certain problems, and so you have to try to deal with those too and try to get it out of them and, do the best you can.
Yes. Now, I'm going to tell you something that bothers me when I'm in public and I see that mom or that dad that's not correcting their children, who's having a temper tantrum because they can't get the toy or something like that, and the kid either hits the parent or says something smart to the parent or whatever. At that moment, I'm ready to go over there and say, let me handle this child. And in a few cases where I've been at work and I see the parent struggling to get the child to calm down, I try to slowly come in and help, you know. And I do it slowly because I don't want the parent to feel like I'm trying to invade whatever they do as a parent, or, you know, uh, override or overrule what they usually do for their children. So I kind of try to see or get a feeling if it's okay from them. And I'm sure they'll let me know, no, leave my kid alone. I'll handle this. But so far, I've had good judgment on when to help a parent or step in, and try to get the kid to calm down. But what do we do when timeout doesn't work, or taking away the toy, or restricting them to go out with friends? What do we do when that doesn't work, Tameka?
That's a great question. And again, like I said, I'm one that doesn't believe that spanking a child is going to kill them. So again, just like with us, when we're disciplined in whatever way by whomever can discipline us, when one thing doesn't work, then it may be necessary to escalate things. And so you do have some children that they don't care if they're not a phone person. They don't care if they can't talk on the phone. So I think it's so necessary to figure out what it is that we all have, something that we really, really like to do, or something that we hold dear to us. So finding out what that is, what is it that this child, that how can we get them to the point where they're going to feel it? Okay, what does he like, or what does she like, that we can take away and really mean it. Not because I know that sometimes with parents, it's like, okay, well, you're going to be grounded for a week, and 3 days later they're not grounded anymore. And so kids know that this generation is wise, and they're wiser in this day and time. And so they know that, okay, well, dad really doesn't mean it. I know he's saying I'm grounded for a week. It's going to be 3 days, and then I'm going to be right back outside, or I'm going to be able to hang out with my friends. So finding out what it is that they really like to do. And again, I don't think that physical punishment necessarily needs to be the first thing we do, but depending on age and where things are with that child, it may be necessary to escalate things again, not necessarily with objects, depending on the age. If they're younger, then you may have to give them a little spanking or something, but I do believe you have to find out what it is they really like, and get that thing. And then when they're missing that, they're feeling it. So that will probably work, versus doing something or taking something they really don't like anyway.
Now what about the parents? Okay, well, children know how to play parents, right? So if one child is disciplined by mom, and mom says, okay, this is your punishment, and in a twofold kind of way, when dad steps in and says, no, we're not going to do that, or if the child does, or if the other parent doesn't know the form of punishment that mom gave, what advice do you have for parents to keep that kid on track, Tameka?
Being on one accord, that is so important, because if they know they can go to dad, and kids can be manipulative, and so that they know that mom is saying one thing, and then they go to dad, and dad says something totally different, then they're going to in some cases use the parents against one another, and they're going to cause division amongst the mother and the father. So I would say being consistent, and that's why it's important that mother and father, that they talk about things like that, and what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, how are we going to deal with this issue together, so that one is not saying one thing and then the other is saying something totally different. So I believe that being on one accord is how you solve that, and standing your ground, both parents.
Bob, did you run into any of those type issues when you were parenting your children?
Yes, of course. I think we all do. Well, yeah, sometimes I'll say Vicky instead of saying my ex-wife. Vicky would, say no, and then they would come to me over here and say, and I would say yes, and then Vicky would find out that it was supposed to be a no, and so I would have to go back and say, now listen, if your mom said no, don't be coming around saying that it's okay, or because that I'm an old softy, I'm gonna give in, and that's not going to work. And I think it's important too for young parents and parents now. One of the things that I did, which I'm really grateful to God for, is that I think it's because not having a dad, it made me really think about being a dad. So maybe sometimes I was over careful and or whatever. But anyways, I would periodically go into their room and I would say, "So how am I doing as a dad?
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree or disagree with something that I've said, or or a rule that I made?" But I also said to them that if I give you a command at one particular time, there's no debate. You have to abide by that command, because I may not be in a situation where I can explain it to you,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever the case may be. If you disagree with that, you can come to me afterwards and say, "Dad, I didn't think this was fair," or whatever. One of my daughters did that when she reminded me that she just walked in when the other two were having at it, and I spanked both. I spanked all three of them when the other one just came in, and I didn't give her an opportunity to. I didn't give her an opportunity to talk. I just said, "No, just bend over and have my little stick and all that." And then that's when she told me, and I felt bad, of course, but it was too late. I hurt a little heart,
Mm-hmm.
but
Now,
she forgave me.
yeah, I'm sure she did. Now, I thought about this just a moment ago. Being in a situation where you have stepchildren and step parents dealing with each other. Um, uh, I guess it would be best. Well, it depends on the children where they are at the time. I guess. I know it. Looking at it from a child's standpoint of view, it could be difficult for a child if they are being raised in one household with, say, dad and stepmom, and then maybe for the weekends they have to transfer to a different home over there with mom and stepdad, and those parents over there have one set of rules, and the parents where that child is staying have another set of rules. That might be a little challenging for a child. What do you think, Tameka?
I think it's absolutely challenging for children, and you do have situations like that where children are in co-parenting type situations, and problems can be caused because you have one parent that is like, this that your wife isn't going to touch my child or
Mm-hmm.
can't discipline my child, and then over here, so it can cause problems, and I think that's where again communication would come into play with all parties to make sure that everybody's on the same page when it comes to that child. I think that would impede, I think that would prevent, I'm sorry, a lot of issues from taking place, when communication takes place. Because again, you have a lot of children that are in that situation where they're going from one home to the next. It could be for, 6 months out of the year they're with one parent and then another parent the other 6 months, and so there's two different beliefs there. So I think that the adults in the situation have to communicate in what will be best for the child or the children who are involved.
Okay, so yeah, we want to encourage parents to maybe consider that if your child is in that type of situation when you're taking on disciplining measures. You've been
Yeah.
listening to Chat City with P. Ross on Oak 93.5 WRLY, Raleigh, North Carolina. I have in the building with me today Mr. Bob Andrade,
Mm-hmm.
musician, and Ms. Tameka Douglas, social worker, evangelist. We are talking about child discipline today, and we've touched on several things. We touched on the awful tragedies that happened with some young adults at UVA, the University of Virginia, where we had students that were shot and killed, and then the awful death of a young lady who was traveling with friends outside of the country only to be left there dead. All right. And it seems to be at the hands of her friends. Bob has written a song pertaining to some terrible things that have just gone on before this. And I think right now is an appropriate time for us to hear one of the songs he played for me last night, actually, and sang. And I was like, how fitting, that'll fit for our subject today, So I asked him would he come at the last minute and do this song for us, and he's agreed. Bob, before you play the song, can you tell us a little bit about what you've written.
Yes, yes, sure, certainly. But I do want to say, first of all, that I used the word my ex-wife, and yes, her name is Vicky, and I just want to say she was a wonderful mother.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that we both shared was a love for our children, for our girls. We definitely loved our girls, and they are well aware of that. So I just wanted to say that.
Okay, and we'll give her a house applause, and you as well, for doing great jobs with your children, and you too. That house applause was for you too, Tameka.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so this song, from watching the school shootings, was just devastating for me because I just couldn't believe it just keeps happening, and so one of the times I went into my studio and I'm either going in there to write a song or do a cover tune, and all of a sudden I hit a chord, and this happens often. This song just came to me, and I wrote this song within a couple of hours. And the song is about reaching out to young people, especially in high school, and letting them know that they don't have to live that world. The title of the song is Come Out of That World, and to let them know that there is hope out there, and that there is love out there, and that there are people that are willing to listen to them, and that they're important. Their life has meaning. They mean something. The fact that they can speak or not speak, the fact that they're just human beings is an amazing thing to me. To be a human being is an amazing creation. And so I wrote this song for them, and really for anyone that considers any kind of violence. Okay, so here I go. Because I do have to say, because they're in an abstract type of mentality, it starts off a little abstract, but then it changes. So here it goes. Oops. All right. Get my headgear going. All right. You're not alone. You're not alone. We are many here. We are many here. Your fields of tears, you ought to be alone. We are here for you. You have a home. You're not alone. We are many here. You're not alone. We'll help you dry those tears. The pain you keep deep inside will only tear you down, make you die. Come on out of that world. There's so much of you to give. Destruction only wants to keep you from living, for it knows there's far more of you to give. You're not alone. We are many here. You're not alone. We'll help you dry those tears. Share those dreams of love you want with those that truly care about you. Don't ever give up on yourself, don't die. There's more to you than that lie. Share those dreams of love you want with those that truly care about you. Don't give up on yourself, don't die. There's more to you than that lie. Come on out from that world. There's so much of you to live. Don't believe that lie that keeps you down, for it only wants to steal your crown. Come on out of that world that doesn't want you to live. Come on out of that world. Your future husband wants you to live. Come on out of that world. There's so much of you to live.
All right. Great message. Come on out of that world. Come on out of that world, child. Come on out of that world.
Awesome.
Written by Bob Andrade. Thank you for that message, Bob. That song. That was very nice.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
All right. We are talking about child discipline on Oak 93.5 FM WRLY Raleigh, Chat City with P. Ross. That's what you're listening to. I'm your host, P. Ross. And I have in the building with me today Tameka Douglas, who is a social worker and a national evangelist, and Mr. Bob Andrade, who is a musician. All right. Question, Tameka. Do we discipline children that are handicapped?
That is an awesome question. Children who are handicapped, of course, may not be able to cognitively understand what they have done wrong. In many cases, and I remember when I think about that, I go back to many years ago when I graduated undergrad, and I did a very short tenure in Wake County schools in the class where the children were handicapped, and I can recall so many things happening and how it was handled in the classroom setting, and in many cases it was, of course, timeout, which is a method that is mainly used with our younger children, and in so many instances those kids could care less. In many cases, they, even though you may have said go to timeout, they did not go, or they would stay there for like 30 seconds and then end up doing something else. So to answer your question, I believe that, again, we have to certainly look at the child in and of themselves, because, of course, when it comes to handicap, we have those who are developmentally handicapped and then those who are physically, but I'm guessing we're more so referring to a developmentally delayed child, of course. So in that case, it's going to be based on the individual, I think. If they can understand why it is that you're disciplining them and what they have done wrong, then I believe that it could work. Again, in the same sort of things that we implement, those things that we do with a child who is not delayed developmentally in taking something away from them, talking with them, sitting down, communicating with them, letting them know what they've done wrong. I believe that it could help based on the child and the child's needs.
Okay. How about teachers? Now, when I was in school, and I think I mentioned this on the show before, when I was going to school in the 70s and 80s, teachers were allowed to paddle kids that gave bad behavior. And in my particular school system, there had to be a witness, and I think some papers had to be signed. But I do remember some moms coming up to the school and trying to fuss at the teachers for spanking the kids and things of that nature. But do we let, I don't know what's going on now in the school system. I don't have any children in the school system, but should we let our teachers spank our children?
They can't do that now. Of course, as far as corporal punishment in the school setting. So I would say I don't think that but we hear about it on the news now. I mean, of course, we all watch the news, so there have been instances where that has happened. But I think it's something that's a teacher. It wouldn't be wise for a teacher to do that, to try to discipline a child physically. They could get in big trouble, of course. From the school system in so doing, legally they can get in trouble. And of course, I wouldn't want to deal with a parent whose child I've put my hands on. So I don't. When you mentioned that the paddling and stuff that occurred back then, I can recall. I believe I was in first grade at Southern Pines Elementary School, and that had just stopped. Mr. Jackson, I think, was our principal back then, but it had just gone away. That type of punishment in the school setting, and I've always heard by parents that is when things went all the way downhill in schools, when they could no longer lay a child across their lap and paddle them. So obviously something worked back then if things began to kind of go in a different direction once they weren't allowed to do that anymore.
Yeah, I say bring it back. I mean, if you have the witnesses or whatever, because I mean, I see these teachers getting beat down in the high schools by children, by teens and stuff. Or bring some type of law enforcement in the schools, which I think is happening now, but I don't know. Bob, real briefly, tell us what you think, your thoughts on that.
Well, I think there's good teachers and bad teachers. I experienced one in high school, and I won't go into that, but I think kids, they know that they can't, they won't suffer any repercussions, so they tend to, go a little, wild, and a lot wild. I really don't have the answer for that. I think it's important to spank a child if it needs it, but, when you step outside the family unit, it's hard because we don't know what the morals are with this a particular teacher, or or what they think should be a spanking. So I'm glad I'm a musician and I don't have to make that decision.
If you would like to comment, give us a call at 919-899-9305. We'll take a couple of calls at this particular time on what you think child discipline action should be. We're going to hear another song from Bob a little later on in the show, but I just want to bring this up too. Is there any truth to the way white parents discipline their children from black parents? Because you all the time, or at least I do, see parodies on that or memes or jokes. I hear jokes about how a white mom would do it versus a black mom, and it seems like the black mom, it's always portrayed that the black mom is going to give a little harsher punishment. She's going to put a fist through the child's face if the child said something smart to her or something like that, whereas the white mom is stereotyped as saying, go into timeout. You got to go in that corner and put your face in there, and you don't come out until I say so. What do you think about that? Either one of you.
We didn't touch on this particular one, but what I've noticed a lot with young parents with young children. One of the things that Vicky and I used to exercise, for lack of a better word, is that we knew that our children needed to get sleep. And unfortunately, I see a lot of young parents with their children out and about, and that child is crying and screaming, and it's like, to me, they're looking at the child like a mule looking at a new fence. They can't understand why. Well, the child's tired. They need their sleep. And that's something that we always made sure that we got home at plenty of time early enough and let them play and then put them to bed. And unfortunately, we don't see a lot of that with parents, and it's sad to me.
Great point. I had another adult bring that to my attention, and it was a coworker actually, and who was old enough to be my mom, and she observed, or we observed, a child screaming and going on, and I can't remember. No, it wasn't work. It was somewhere else where it was kind of late night, and that particular person said that child needs to be at home in bed. It's tired,
Right.
So that does play on behavior, I'm sure, with young children. Child abuse. Seem that like there's laws now that protect teens from spankings or some type of paddling from parents. You got these teens now, or children, that will call the police on their parents. Can you speak a little bit about that for us, Tameka?
Yes, absolutely. And that is something that tends to come up quite a bit. I think that parents have to know what they can do as far as disciplining their children. And because of course, when they call the police is going to likely call Child Protective Services, or children now call Child Protective Services. And basically, when it comes to that, they're not going to say you cannot discipline your children. They're going to, of course, suggest strategies. What did you communicate first? But when it comes to children being removed because the police was called and a parent spanked their child, I think it's 20, as long as there are not any visible bruises, bumps, marks, things of that nature. So of course it's recommended that if the parent is going to spank the child, that it's done with an open hand and not being excessive with it, because of course when you get to seeing bruises and switch marks and swollen eyes and things like that, then something was done excessively. So I think parents have to know that they not be, first of all, scared of the police being called and scared of CPS coming and knocking on their doors because they discipline their child, and just knowing that if you're going to do it, you don't want to do it to the point where the child is bruised and bumped and jumping when you come and talk to them because they're scared you're going to punch them or something like that.
Are there any hotline numbers that we may have that can help, or are there any programs out there that can help parents on this matter of disciplining their children?
Yeah, I think that in your local, when it comes to knowing what you can do, Child Protective Services are always offering parenting classes, for one. A lot of times children, and I like what Bob said about children being tired and things of that nature, because a lot of that, what we see with the younger children when discipline becomes necessary, is because they're tired, or because of something that maybe, even eating things that they're being fed that's causing them to be overly hyperactive in school and things of that nature, and then behaviors are being exhibited. So there are classes that talks about all of that, like good eating habits for children, and a certain amount of time that they should be resting. So of course I work for Wake County Human Services, and our main number, which you would be able to access someone in child services, is 919-212-7000. And for those who are in different counties, of course, you want to go to your local human services, and could just ask to be directed to someone that is in child services who could definitely help. And there are just an array of other just services that are out there that helps with just parenting skills, parenting children in general. And I mean, the internet and Google is is such an advantage for us, and just searching things like that. But again, knowing what you can do as a parent, I think is so important, because again, we're dealing with a wiser generation, and if they can say, hey, I'm gonna call the police, I'll call CPS, a lot of parents become fearful of that. So
thank you for that information, Tameka. All right, so Mr. Bob Andrade, is a musician that's been here in the studio with us. He's a wonderful musician. I met him a few years ago as a percussionist. Learned last night he can play guitar, and he's a great vocalist as well. Bob, thank you again for coming to the show, spending a little time with us. Our time is quickly slipping away from us, but we want to hear another song, original song from you that you have written. But before you do, can you just quickly tell us a little bit more about yourself, sir?
About myself?
Yes.
Oh, gosh. Let's see. This should be quick. I'm a musician. I love music. I've always loved music. I especially knew that I wanted to be a musician when I saw the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan. I have my hobbies that I enjoy. I love reading, especially philosophy, self-help books, the insight that so many people have that write these books. And let's see. And I love carpentry. That's how I fed my family. Had my own business in remodeling. And I love my girls. Yeah, I love my girls. Of course, Vicky too, the mother of my children, our children, and Angie, who's my fiance. And so I'm pretty straightforward, simple. I try to practice the most important thing of all that Christ said is to love one another. And I try to practice that.
Okay. Thank you. Now give us the title of your song and take us off the air. But before you do, I just want to mention that this is our last show of the year, 2022. Thank you, everybody, for listening to Chat City with P. Ross. Those of you that have mentioned that you've been watching or listening to us, we'll be back next year in 2023. We're taking a holiday break, and I want to wish everybody a great, safe holiday. And the last we'll hear is from Mr. Bob Andrade.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, apparently God is leading me to write songs that are important for people to hear. This song is about borderline personality of a lady that I met a few years back, and the struggles that she goes through, and so I ended up reading a book on it, and it's real, and so my heart goes out to people that are in this situation. So this one is I titled Saturday Cartoons. She woke this morning with cartoons in her head. She's gonna find out who's leading her today. They say good morning, we've been waiting for you. Just sit back now, we got your whole day too. Saturday cartoons play in her head. Saturday cartoons give her no rest. The doc says, sit down, tell me what's on your mind. They hear you speaking, so they run and hide. Shh, don't say nothing, we'll leave you alone. So man, you can even call this day your own. Saturday cartoons playing in her head. Saturday cartoon, give her no rest. Saturday cartoons playing in her head. Saturday cartoons give her no rest. It's been too long now, she's got to break free. But only you, Jesus, can set her free.
All right now.
Got to live now, wanna be free. Time to have a life and set me free. Saturday cartoons playing in her head. Saturday cartoons, get out of her head. Get out of her head. She wants to live instead. Get out of her head.
Awesome.
Awesome.
All right. Cat City with P. Ross. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great, great weekend.
Community Radio, WRLYLP, Raleigh.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm